In section 3.2, we look at how organisms are classified and named. So as far as the classification goes, we have different languages according to our cultures and where we live. So it became clear that scientists needed a common way to classify organisms. So this process of classifying living things is called taxonomy. Early classification began about 2,000 years ago with Aristotle, and he looked at organizing or classifying organisms into kingdoms based on whether they're plants or animals. However, once we developed microscopes, we found more organisms, and so we needed two more kingdoms that developed from what he originally had created. So here are the six kingdoms. We have archaea, bacteria, protista, fungi, plantae, and animalia. I don't think you need to commit these to memory because you'll be able to access the information that's here, but definitely know what differentiates one from another. There's a checkpoint question for you. And so domains were developed later on. They're a more recent development because we need we developed a better understanding of the relationship between certain organisms, and so we could classify them into three different domains, and those are larger groups that include all of the kingdoms. So they're based on the cellular composition of the organisms. So we have three different domains: eukarya, bacteria, and archaea, and so all of our kingdoms fall into one of these domains. So you should know the characteristics that make up these domains, but again, you don't need to commit it to memory because you'll be able to access this anytime you need to. So we have 8 separate levels of classification from most inclusive to most exclusive. So inclusive means that it's broader, exclusive means it's more specific. So the order that this system goes is domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So you can refer to this as a little acronym that I've found has stuck with me since I was in Bio 20. And so that's Dear King Phil came over for Greek salad. So that uses the first letter of each of those levels to help you remember the order of it, because it is important that you know how that order is arranged from inclusive to exclusive. So this whole system of classification, this domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, was developed by Carlos Linnaeus. That's a name you might see in the future. As far as naming systems go, we use binomial nomenclature to identify and classify species. So binomial means two, and nomenclature is the names that they're given. Every organism has a reference that tells us what its genus and its species is. So that's where the binomial comes from. The genus is one, species is the other to give us two. These names are recorded in Latin and sometimes Greek, just so that they can be consistent between scientists, regardless of where they are around the world. Here's a quick review for you of our kingdoms, domains, definition of taxonomy, and then here's an example of some classifications. So they're starting here with the kingdom, and so domain isn't listed for these, but common name is listed across the top, and then it shows you as you go through. So kingdom, they're all part of the Animalia kingdom. Phylum changes between the goose and the human, and the mosquito and the lake darner. So this is where the first changes start to show up as far as the classification goes. And then it gets more specific as we go, with the binomial nomenclature right at the bottom for each of these. So you don't have to memorize these. Obviously, there's so many different organisms and they all have their classification levels like this. But you will have a chance to practice on one of your assignments, I believe. So as far as changing names go, with the ability to genetically sequence DNA, we can verify whether or not it's correctly classified. So we can compare DNA from one organism to another that we suspect could be potentially related. And so this is where the distinction between different phylums usually comes into play. So for example, skunks have recently been removed from the family that contains the weasels and have been placed in their own family because their DNA doesn't quite match as well as we thought it might have. An easy way to classify organisms is to use visible characteristics as well. So rather than going right back to DNA and trying to analyze the DNA patterns, we classify them based on what we can see. And so this is called the dichotomous key. These keys use pairs of descriptions to simplify the identification of an organism. So anything that's complex and specific for keys could take up many, many pages and will rely on really careful observation. So keys are usually specific, but they would not start at the phylum level. Usually they start at the order or family level. This video here is one from the Amoeba Sisters. It will help you out with all of this information as well. And so here's our checkpoint. Why do we use this agreed upon system rather than common names? And so that's all because of language differences across the world. There's 3.2 review here on page 92 if you want to work through that as well.